Welcome back to the show, everyone. I am super excited because we have David here. How are you doing today, David?
I'm amazing, Caroline. So nice to be here.
I am so excited to have you here and another fellow Coloradan. Coloradan, I
Yeah,
think.
I think
Is that
so.
what we are?
Yeah, I'm a
Transplants? Is that
mountain.
obvious?
We're mountain people.
We're mountain people. Yep, exactly. And I'm so excited to have you to discuss all of your expertise on meditation and we'll get into this, but you are also, the reason I actually discovered manifestation a couple years ago. So,
What?
yes, I'm very excited to have you here. Super fan, maybe. But before we kind of get into all that good stuff, can you just share a little bit about you? You have a pretty cool story about kind of your spiritual awakening. So, I'd love to hear that and how you became this pretty well known meditation teacher that you are today.
Yeah, the brief version is I was a, regular 16-year-old pimply faced kid growing up in the suburbs in New Jersey. And I just picked up a book out of the bookstore that my brother dragged me to the bookstore, and I think he was doing a lot of psychedelics at the time in
Nice.
college. And it's like, bro, you got to read something, man. You don't read anything. So he dragged me to the bookstore and I picked up The Power of Now. It was the year 2000. So it was before Eckhart Tolle was on Oprah or was that popular, but I just saw a pile of books. I picked it up. I brought it home. I opened it up, and first few pages, it was just like, "Hey, your mind is constantly living in the future, constantly projecting into the past, and that's the cause of all your pain and suffering." And when I read that, I was like, "Holy shit, that's the truest thing I've ever heard in my life." And it was like a light bulb just inside me went off, and it was a little deeper than that. It felt like something that was like lifetimes worth of, if you had past lives and there was like 1,000 lives you were working on something, it felt more like that than just like a momentary, oh, oh, that makes sense. Some people read something and they go, oh, that makes sense. But for me, it was like this radical freaking shift. I spent just hours and hours after that meditating nonstop all the time. My parents were like, what is he doing upstairs all the time? This teenage boy. I was like, I'm meditating, I swear. And I would just like read all of these books, and I would go on the internet, and it was like the earlier side of the internet, a little AOL dial up. And then you finally get online, and I would just like look at ashrams in India and salivate, just like wanting to go live there. And my parents weren't religious, they weren't spiritual, they weren't political, they were just like immigrants who were working really hard. And it came out of nowhere. It was crazy. No one in my life ever had any influence on me at all in this direction. It just came out of nowhere. Um, and eventually I did move to India, into the Himalayas, and live in an ashram and shave my head and sit and meditate with monks. And I definitely fulfilled that calling. I don't feel that calling anymore in that way. I take groups to the Himalayas now. We go on retreats and probably do it a little too fancy, to be honest, but it's the only way to get people to go. Um, yeah, and so I went and I got a degree in philosophy. I studied the Western and Eastern philosophies and sat in meditation for a long, long time. That's kind of the short version of it. And then I eventually started teaching on that app, Insight Timer, which is, I think, where you
Yeah,
took one of my courses. Yeah.
yeah.
And here we are.
And here we are. That's very cool. So, I mean, you were pretty young, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I even thought about meditating till a few years ago, like in my mid late 20s. So, you had that exposure pretty young. And did you feel like, because I hear a lot from people like either I don't have time to meditate, which is funny, or like my mind
Yeah.
is too busy. Do you think that since you started when you were younger, did that have maybe an impact on you feeling like I can do this?
Yes and no. I think definitely getting a head start like that is helpful. I already probably had a busy mind at 16,
Yeah.
but not nearly as busy as when you get older. Like it got harder for me later in life rather than easier, because life happens to everybody, no matter what. You get your heart broken, someone passes away, you're worried about money. Where should I live? Who am I? Why am I on this planet? All that
Yeah.
shit. So it all happens. It's unavoidable part of the human experience. So I think I'm lucky in the sense that I just had really good tools to deal with it, and then I surrounded myself with amazing people who are also doing that kind of work. That was very helpful. And but it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because when you surround yourself with a bunch of spiritual people, they get a little obsessive about their own personal growth, and it can be annoying, or a little bit of like a bypassing of regular life. Like there was definitely a point where I lived in an ashram and I was like, I don't need a relationship. I don't need to make money. Who needs a job? I'm just going to meditate. This is the only thing that matters. And to an extent, I was kind of avoiding life, And so when I stopped avoiding, I think a lot of the thoughts started rushing back in. And then I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Now I got to deal with this at another level. So I think life is like a spiral. It's like we think we're going through the same thing over and over, but every time we get a little closer to the bullseye and a little bit deeper, sometimes it gets a little bit more difficult. Like, oh, I thought that last relationship was hard, but this one's a doozy. And so we start, meditating in an ashram in the Himalayas is easy, to have no thoughts and to be chill. And then in real life, it's a little bit more work, and you have to pay more attention. So I don't pretend that like I had this one spiritual awakening and then I never had any thoughts again. Maybe that's like Eckhart Tolle's experience, but for the rest of us mortals, it's a little bit more a day-to-day practice that may never end. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That makes a lot of sense, and I like that analogy of kind of going around, and every time's a little bit different. Maybe you have another lens to look through, but you're still kind of tested. We all are on this earth for some crazy reason, and yeah, I like that idea of figuring it out that way.
yeah.
And what were some of those experiences like when you were in an ashram? Do you have any like fun stories, or were you just like all I did was meditate?
Actually, we did a lot of fooling around, to be honest, and because you're there as a Westerner and you have money, a lot of money in comparison. It was like $2 a night to stay there, and it was $1 a meal. So like, there's no worries. You're hanging out with your friends a lot. So it did take a lot of personal discipline to just sit and meditate. Um, Probably one of my favorite stories was sitting, and I've always been a bit of a jokester, so I was with a bunch of my buddies, and we were laughing very hard, very loudly at night in the ashram. And this woman came up to our window and was like, "I am trying to meditate. Will you just shut up?" Which made us laugh way harder.
Yes.
And I realized how seriously people took themselves all the time, and how that actually wasn't that helpful. It was almost like meditating as a job. And I'm gonna find enlightenment the way I get straight A's at school, or the way I build a business, or the way I conquer life. I'm gonna get enlightenment while I'm in India so I could bring it back to LA and show it off to my friends. And we were just like, whoa, that's an intense energy. So that was a good lesson for me. Luckily, I've never taken myself too seriously. I'm very aware of just a nerdy Jewish kid from the suburbs who likes Star Trek and likes to oddly sit and meditate for long periods of time. So, but when you do take yourself too seriously, I think what happens is you freeze, you solidify the pain and the patterns that you're in, and you try to control them. And what it actually needs is like a letting go, and being soft and compassionate towards yourself. So the thing that's going to make you a great business person or really good at something in life, like being an athlete, is not going to work for enlightenment. It's much more a surrender and the letting go, and instead of like a conquering. So when people come to meditation in the beginning, like, I'm going to do headspace, I'm going to do it every day, and I'm going to show everyone I do it every day, because they're going to see my Instagram thing that I meditated again
Yeah.
today, and I have 500 straight days of meditating, and for this many hours. I had a student once say, "Hi, I don't really know why I'm in this class. I mean, I've already meditated like 5,000 hours, but maybe there's something I could learn here." I was like, "Fuck off!" Like, you quantified your hours. It has not. You're as likely to reach enlightenment, as a teacher of mine used to say, by falling off a bar stool and hitting your head as you are meditating. So, but yet we meditate anyway. And so, yeah, the ego wants to control the experience and it wants to quantify it, but it's just not that kind of game.
That's
Yeah.
I love that story and what you said about, showing it off, and I want to get enlightened so I can bring it home and show people, because that's kind of part of that rigidity too, right?
Yeah.
That I hear my clients talk about all the time. They're like, "Well, I've been really trying to journal, but I just hate journaling and it's not working for me in the morning, but I feel like if I don't journal, I failed, air quotes, my
Yeah.
morning routine." And I'm like, it can, ebb and flow, right? There don't necessarily have to be restrictions, or like you said, you start Headspace or some other app and you're like, I'll do it for 30 days. Like, is that serving you if you everything falls apart on day 31?
Yeah, I would say, girl, burn that journal. You don't want to do it, don't do it. Um, I'm just kidding, but maybe not. Uh, you cannot succeed to enlightenment. You can only fail to enlightenment. So maybe you could succeed by toning up your body, or, saving money and being very disciplined. It's a paradox when it comes to this part of life. It's very much a failure and a surrender, and a giving up, and a being present, and a not trying to control anymore. And it's so counterintuitive to every single thing we've ever learned as people who've grown up in the West. So I love this story of, I've told it once or twice before, but of Alexander the Great meeting a yogi. And I interviewed this guy one time, this philosopher in India, who tells this story, and he imagines what their conversation was like. It's historical, it happened, but we don't know what they really talked about. But the story goes like, Alexander sees this naked yogi sitting meditating on a rock, and Alexander's like, what are you doing with your life? And the yogi says, I'm focusing on nothingness. And Alexander the Great goes, what a waste of a life. And the yogi goes, what are you doing? And Alexander the Great goes, I'm going to conquer the whole world. And the yogi's like, what a waste of a life, you arrogant 27-year-old or whatever, right? And so they laugh at each other, like, what you we both think the other thinks, they each think the other is crazy, or is missing the plot. And I think that's a part of, we have both Alexander the Great and that yogi in each of us. I want to conquer the world and make progress and win and succeed. And then the other part that says, well, what is this nothingness, this emptiness inside me, this stillness that I don't have to earn or deserve, or get a golden ticket to heaven to get into? Like, what is this if I just stop, and surrender? And I think we both have both of those inside of ourselves, and they could feel like they're very much in conflict. And so if you take your Alexander side and you put it into meditation, you're gonna fail at succeeding. And vice versa. If you go in as a CEO into your company and you just sit and do nothing, like, your business is going to crumble, right? But if you bring the awareness of that stillness into your business, wow, that has a whole nother dimension. And if you are going to conquer the world, say as an athlete or whatever it is, and you have that stillness, it brings another dimension. um, and so I think we can almost integrate those two parts of ourselves. They need to work together. And yeah, most of us are like 80-90% Alexander and a very little yogi. For a time in my life, I was like 80% yogi, and I had no money in the bank, I had nowhere to go, and I was like, yeah, this isn't good either, is it? It'd be
That's
nice to like have a plane ticket. Yeah, just
right. I love that comparison. Yeah, that I feel like 99% Alexander some days, that's for sure. But I'm always kind of working on bringing that balance back. And
yeah.
I love the idea of integrating the two sides. What are some strategies that like have worked really well for you or for some of your clients that have helped them shift kind of from that mostly conquering to a little bit more stillness and awareness?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways we could uh, look at this. Why don't you give me a common issue that your students, clients, listeners tell you they have, and let's approach it from that angle.
Okay, so
Yeah.
how about someone who will kind of use me as an example? Like, I come from a really intense background of dieting and competing in bodybuilding, and transitioning to more intuitive eating, less like I have to work out or I should work out or I should eat this, to more what is my body even asking for? Like, what do I need to feel at my best kind of situation?
So it sounds like the goal is to find like a harmony and a balance
Yeah,
inside yourself,
totally.
instead of like conquering yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So, for example, if a student came to my meditation class and they said that and asked about that, what I would probably start with is sit them down, have them close their eyes and go, all right, well, what is the energy that you're struggling with here? Describe it to me a little bit. So they might say, well, I don't have balance. All right, let's go deeper. What is that feeling when you don't have balance? Is this need to succeed? All right, let's go deeper. Why do you have a need to be so successful in bodybuilding or in fitness or whatever it is? And then they might say something like, huh, I don't know. But there's usually an I don't know, because if they knew, we'd be somewhere else.
Hmm.
And so it's very important to hit that point of I don't know and not try to jump over it analytically. This most people they get to that spot and then they start getting super heady, like they're talking to their therapist and they're describing their entire childhood to me. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Stop right there. Uh, what's the energy? And they'll be like, the energy's frustration. I'm like, now we're talking. You should be describing things almost like as a kindergartner in colors, in energies, in shapes, like in fluctuations of feelings. That's when I know a student is doing the work and not in their head. So my first job is to get people out of their head and into being aware of energy. So that's always like first step, out of your head, aware of energy. So if someone says, I think, then I know they're not there. Right. They're like, I think what it is. Now they're just thinking about it. They might say, I feel. That's a better start. It's not where we want to end, but it's a better start. I want them to get to a place where they're just like seeing and knowing and sensing energy. But so I feel frustration. Where does that frustration come from? Someone will say, oh man, when I was a kid, I always had to perform to get attention from my parents. It's like, boom, now we're getting somewhere. Describe that feeling to me. And it's like layer after layer, we peel it back and we realize where that energy is like, it's like a charged particle. Particles have a positive charge, negative charge. They have a certain amount of electrons. Some of it attract and repel. So like we have this like ball of energy inside of us. Maybe there's some pain in it. And if we don't deal with it, it starts attracting other balls of pain. Like, why did I attract a partner who's full of pain? Why did I attract a friend who's always causing drama? Why do I attract a client who's always sucking my energy? Right? Oh, because I got one of those magnets inside of me. So, what we want to do is find each of those and start to reconcile them. It's like pulling the rubber bands off that ball that's made of rubber bands until there's no tension left. And then the excessive thoughts that everyone's trying to meditate away, then they naturally go away. But there's no amount of mantraing or meditating you could do to get your pain to go away. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest misconception when people start meditating is that they're going to like pray their thoughts away. And yes, thoughts will go away while you're praying, but when you stop, they flood right back in. So we have to deal with the actual energy, and to deal with the energy, we have to become aware of the energy. So those are always the first steps. And once we start to become aware of the energy and peel back each layer, we get really good at seeing ourselves. So meditation is about insight, right? Seeing inside. So you have two eyes to see out and you have one to see in. So when you close your eyes, you're seeing into yourself. And when we do that, that's when it's like turning a light on in a dark room, right? That's what enlightenment is. We awaken a light inside of ourselves. Every little corner of darkness, of negative patterns, of habits, of pain, of limiting beliefs, right? There might be thousands of these things. And each time we meditate, just like every time you work out, right? Like inch by inch, rep by rep, you build this muscle, this strength. So you're building yourself on the outside and also on the inside.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful strategy. And I would encourage everyone to like rewind and listen to that again because it is very similar to what I ask my clients if they're like, well, I want to lose a couple pounds. I'm like, okay, well, why? And getting
Hmm.
past that, like, oh, well, I just think I'll look a little bit better. That is never the
No.
reason. That is
Yeah.
never the reason. Digging deeper is such a huge part of goal setting. I think especially for women, it's really important, I think, to dig deeper and realize that there might be some frustration, like you said, or even like some sadness from
Yeah.
like really, really deep inside you. um, that is leading you towards making some decisions that maybe aren't great for your health, looking long term.
Yeah. And so when it comes to body image, usually what we're looking for is some kind of validation, right? And then the validation is really because we want love, right? Like I want someone to love and accept me. And the shallow version of that is if I can't have that, at least you'll love my body, right? Just if you love my body, that's a good start. But what most people are looking for is a deeper level of love. And if you create your love out of just the superficial, then eventually there's going to be this emptiness inside. It may be 5 or 10 or 20 years down the line. But as a teacher of mine used to say, nothing gets suppressed successfully forever. And you don't want to build this huge fake construct around you that's so complicated that it's too hard to unwind later.
Yeah.
Right? Like this web of lies you've told yourself and others. And one day all of our bodies will, our skin will start to, get a little more loosey goosey.
Yeah.
And our eyebrow hairs will get bigger, you know. So I think it's really important to look at those real, that what we're really going for and be honest about that. And then the pain around maybe not getting it, not receiving it. That's where we
Mm-hmm.
always want to start being meditation. Successful meditation is not about technique for me as much as it is about like radical self-honesty. I don't care what visualization or mantra technique you use. If you can close your eyes and be super honest with how you feel and who you are, the rest is going to be so much, life is going to be so much easier for you, and then you're going to attract authentic people. So the people
Mm-hmm.
you're attracting in your life are a reflection of how authentic you're being with yourself. So if you're surrounded by a bunch of people who are full of shit, then you're probably full of shit in some
Yeah.
way. you know
Yeah.
Maybe not in the same way as them, but in a different way. So you want to find out, well, what way am I full of shit? Because I'm clearly, these charged particles in me are attracting something similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think sometimes, at least for me, when I'm having those days or those moments when I probably should turn inward, right? Those are some of the hardest times for me to actually like, okay, go sit down and just like have some stillness with this, close my eyes, breathe into it. I don't know if that's everybody, but what are some tips that you have like during those times when it is you kind of feel like I should pause right now, but it's really hard to? What are some
Yeah,
things that like you do?
that is everybody.
Okay.
Almost. That's almost, I can't say everybody, but it's almost
Yeah.
everybody. Well, let's go a little bit deeper with that. So, what I like to ask people is what is their default? So, for example, when you don't sit down, what do you tend to do instead?
Usually something that's like more exhausting, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's like, digging headfirst into work or trying to load another project onto my plate that's just going to make me more irritated. I tend to go to the burnout route.
So our your default of what you, so we either default usually by overriding or default by avoiding. Sometimes they're the same thing, they look similar. So you, sounds like you default by overriding by working harder.
Typically,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, so you want to
Great.
just book, so you just, it's, seeing energy is like watching the weather. It's like you look out your window and you're like, ah, there's clouds. I see the storm coming. You can feel the storm in the air or the
Oh, yeah.
tornado, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're walking in your living room, you're cleaning up, you're going, I should sit and meditate. I'm going to overwork now. And then just like out of the corner of your third eye, not in your physical eyes, out of the corner of your third eye, you see a cloud and you're like, oh, there's that overriding work energy. I can sense the energy. And then that's the best moment to ever meditate because so what you want to do is you want to close your eyes, you want to take that cloud, put it right on the screen of your mind eye and look right into it and go, what pain are you made of that I'm trying to avoid sitting with myself? And it's like, oh, if I work harder and do better, make more money, people will love me more, I'll feel more stable, whatever, those answers as Pema Chodron, the Buddhist monk, says, she says, our neurosis and our enlightenment are made of the same material. Our neurosis and our wisdom are made of the same material. So you look into that cloud of energy, and there's just like so much wisdom in that, of why you've been behaving a certain way and feeling a certain way. And then when you really get it and work through it, you're free of it. So whenever you feel like you're the furthest away, as a teacher of mine would say, that's when you're the closest. Like when you're like, oh, now is not the time to meditate. I'm going to call that person and tell them what I really think. No, this is the moment to sit down. Right. It's the same
Yeah.
as like if you're working on eating issues and you're like, the chocolate is 6 inches from your mouth and the fridge is open and you're completely unconscious. Like that is the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I don't know if I have like really solid tips. Um, it's more about becoming aware of energy. So it's like become aware of the weather, and then you have to learn to enjoy pain and
Yeah.
discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know people who their whole lives are based on running away from pain. I will get rich and surround myself with comfort every minute of every day. If there's anything uncomfortable, I will get it out of my life immediately. If a person makes me feel uncomfortable, whatever it is. And that will cause the ultimate pain. It truly will. So meditating is about being comfortable with pain. And as someone said, pain plus reflection equals growth. Avoidance of pain will will be the opposite of growth, right?
Yeah.
So nobody likes to hear that because it's not fun and sexy, but the only way around is through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that awareness piece. I think that's the first start of like changing any, even just any like basic habit. It's usually just
Yeah.
becoming aware of it. So I do like that advice. And I think that's also where guided meditations can be really helpful. That's, I found in my experience, at least, like starting kind of with more guided meditations and then working towards silence was a lot easier route for me than going
Yeah.
like straight into, I'm just going to sit here for 20 minutes. Um, and so I'd love to talk about Insight Timer and your courses on
Sure.
there, because that is, I think I've tried every meditation app, and Insight Timer was by far my favorite, especially because of the course options
Me
that you
too.
get. And that is how I first found your content, and first found manifestation with your, I think it was called The Energetics of Success and Manifestation,
Yeah.
that course that you created. Um, and I actually did that heading into my first bodybuilding competition,
Awesome.
and did like all the 30 days, every practice, and did really well. And then ended up winning my pro card shortly after
What?
using the same
Congratulations.
exercises. Yeah. And like, it was so that those were kind of the first things I manifested were some fitness goals. And that's when I was like, this is real. This definitely works, taking time for yourself and
Beautiful.
following a lot of the advice that you had. And so I guess my first question is, how's meditation and manifestation, like how are those two related?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. Well, and we could also talk about like shallow manifestation and deep manifestation. Like,
Yeah.
I just want this big house, diamond, car, whatever. Now, there's this meme I saw. So it was like it was that little baby Yoda from
Oh my
the
God, the baby Yoda.
yeah, from that new Disney show, and he's sitting there going, "I'm manifesting a 4 bedroom, 3 bathroom for $10." Like that, just give me what I want, universe, because I'm thinking about it
Mm-hmm.
level. And then there's like the real deep, I'm really in touch with my soul and what my destiny is and my purpose. And I'm transforming myself from the inside out. And then from the outside in, that's manifesting as a reflection of who I am. Right. That's the one that takes all the work and that most people don't want to do. But that's where I think, sometimes somebody's got some like I don't know how to say it, like maybe they got some good karma sitting there and they just think of something and it manifests and like, whoa, it worked. Maybe that happens 2 or 3 or 10 times, but as they go deeper, it stops happening as easily, or things get more complicated in life. But at first you're like, whoa, I was manifesting every time I thought of something. Usually that'll last for a while, but it only has so much runway, and then life asks you to go deeper with it. So if that does happen to you, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, all right, now I have to do the work. And that takes a lot of self mastery and nurturing. So, just to be very practical with it, when you sit down to meditate, you're like, all right, I'm really looking to create. So, give me an example of something one of your students maybe is working on creating.
Um, Food freedom comes up a lot. So, kind of like we were talking about before, like manifesting a relationship with food that feels easy, that feels flowing and nurturing versus this like stressful, strict kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's start at the end goal. So you close your eyes to meditate, and I ask you, what is your goal? You say this freedom around food. If you, what if you just saw an image of yourself of having that freedom and having a different relationship with food? What do you look like? How do you feel? Right? We start there, and then we have to reverse engineer our way there. So what is the energy between that and where you are right now? What do you feel that's keeping you from that space? And then you may be on step 1, 2, or 9 or 10 from getting there. I don't know. Everyone's different in their life process. So first of all, we have to be honest with where we are. So in that course, a lot of times I'll ask the student, from 0 to 100, how much can you have? How much do you truly feel like you can deserve and have that goal right now? How much permission do you have to give yourself to have that? And they might be 10%, 50, you know, 0. Okay, well, why do you feel like you don't deserve or can't have that goal? Because I'm not good enough. All right, now we've got something to work on. And then we have to peel all those layers back on why I don't feel good enough. Each layer by layer, memory by memory, pain experience by pain experience, until we really transform ourselves from the inside out. Because if we don't do that, what we do is we fill that manifesting image with the pain that we're in unconsciously. So maybe 10% is conscious, I want this, and then 90% is unconscious. That's where most of our energy is. And we fill it with that. And we're like, how come all my creations and manifestations are a little warped when they come out? They're like kind of what I wanted, but not exactly. Sometimes the opposite. And it's because the true energy is unconscious still. So it's the same kind of laws of physics, laws of enlightenment. Once you turn the light on inside yourself, then you can shine a light outside and know what you want and where your path is going. And it's the same light, whether you shine it inside or out. If you shine it on the outside, you go, oh, that's my path. So there are some questions in life that scientists and academics can answer for us. And then there are some, or, therapists, teachers, spiritual teachers, whoever, and there are some that nobody can answer for us. And we don't realize that because we're trained that like every question could be answered analytically. I'll do a pros and a cons list. I'll ask all my
Yep.
best friends what they think. I'll bounce the idea off everyone I know,
Uh,
all things we do to avoid sitting still and just asking deeply intuitively what that answer is. And when we do that, nobody's trained us how to do that, right? You might get a degree in physics, but if you take a physicist with 3 PhDs and you ask them, how do you really get in touch with your decisions around relationships? They may not know. They may actually be like in third grade around that topic, right? Or money. I've seen very, very smart people in certain areas of life just be horrendous with money. They're just emotional. They just lock up, right? So just because you're really good at one thing and you're intelligent doesn't mean you will be at another. So we have to actually practice getting good at seeing our own path. That's an ability. Most people, I ask them, what's next step on your path? They say, I think it's this, or I feel it's that. And those are actually not the places you're going to get your answers. I know feeling is very popular intuitively, but when I teach my students, I train them to see and to know, to see and to know, because feelings can be very convoluted until we've really worked on ourselves. I feel like I should have that chocolate cake. That's just how I feel. And 2 pieces. Like you can't do intuitive eating until and you're the expert on this, not me, until you reset your system and maybe you detoxified yourself to an extent, because you're not intuitively eating. You're eating from emotion, you're eating from pain, you're eating from pattern, right? So you can't
100%.
start intuitively eating. But if we can get you to a place where you've really worked on yourself, then you can. And the same goes for finding your answers. Then you can feel into them. But at first, I draw people up behind their eyes into the center of their heads. When they close their eyes, they open that mind's eye, and I ask them to start to see their path and see their own answers. And that's like, it's like sharpening a knife. It's a skill that takes time and energy. That most of the images that we receive in our mind are passive, right? From social media, from TV, from computer. We're given
Mm-hmm.
images. Rarely do we create images. We have to practice seeing, and that muscle is in atrophy. And so that a lot of meditation around manifestation might be seeing the next thing.
Yeah.
And it takes practice. So there's some tools involved in finding our own answers and seeing them intuitively. And then obviously can't just see them. We have to take that step. A lot of people see their answers and do nothing.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
point. And I
Yeah.
really like how you brought up the I think and the I feel, because I personally always hear I think like so often. And especially in relation to the scale in my work. And they're like, well, I
Yeah.
saw that the scale was this, and I think that all this terrible things are happening. And I'm like, yeah, but what else is going on? You know, what else is going on in your body, in your head? But again, it comes back to kind of like taking that minute to pause. And you mentioned seeing, right, as kind of a good way to check in.
Hmm.
What about hearing? Like, I know for
Inner
me,
voice.
I usually receive messages or like guidance a lot from hearing things versus like not always being visual. Is that just kind of person dependent, would you say?
Yeah, I think hearing your inner voice is a beautiful way of getting in touch with your intuition. When you really get good at this kind of thing in life, you want to be hearing, seeing, and knowing and feeling. So it's like I see the cake, I touch it, I taste it, right? You all the senses work to we have all these senses because they each cover a certain aspect of life. We need all of them. So we want them all firing on all cylinders. So I think hearing your inner voice, seeing what your next step is, knowing it, feeling it in your heart, all together. That's where we want to get to. But it's like muscle building. We sometimes we build one or two or three together, right? Sometimes we just work on one at a time
Yeah.
and isolate it. It depends. What when I work with someone, it depends on what they need, what I can see that they need next, you know.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think another big piece of, you know, meditation and this pausing and manifesting what you want or what you're trying to create, a big piece is patience too, right? Like you said, coming back to the practice, but also just being patient with yourself. Like when I first started meditating or doing any type of spiritual practice, like I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I was totally stuck in my thoughts, you know, trying all the exercises of like watching your thoughts pass like clouds and all these things.
Hmm.
But it probably took me, I don't know, at least 6 to 12 months of really consistent practice until I was seeing some visuals, or like I said, hearing is usually more common for me. So patience, I think, is another huge piece of it, which nobody likes to hear.
Yeah, people hate patience. So
Yeah.
annoying. So
Mm-hmm.
annoying having to wait for what you want. Why can't I order my enlightenment on Amazon? I paid for
Yes.
Prime. Where's my enlightenment pillow that will do it for me while I sleep? We got where's Dave Asbury when you need him with his all his gadgets for enlightenment or whatever.
Right.
The
Yeah.
bulletproof guy. Yeah. There's a biohack for everything, you know. This music will is like meditating times 10. I always hear that. And it's yeah, but what happens when you don't turn the music off and you're like in an argument with your partner or whatever? So there's no shortcut on that front. um, I would like to distinguish patience and apathy or stuckness. Sometimes they're hard to differentiate. I
Mm-hmm.
was working with a client once, and I said, are you I asked her, are you single? And she said, yeah. And I said, how long have you been single for? And she said, 30 years. 30 years. And at that point, that's not patience. That's stuckness, right? She was just, I could tell just speaking to her, looking at her energy, she was just stuck. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked her why she thought she was single. She wasn't sure, and I just asked her. I said, "Did your dad cheat on your mom when you were a kid?" And she said, "Oh yeah, we grew up in Hollywood. Dad always cheated on mom." I was like, "What effect did that have on you?" And she said, "Well, never trust men." And I said, "Do you think that's why you've been single for a while?" And she was like, "Yeah, yeah, that's why." Uh, And so I don't know if she ever actually went and worked on that pain or not, and healed it, and met a partner, if that was in her on her path. But at that moment, at first she was giving off this energy of I'm patient, but then when we dug a little deeper, it was pain that was just stuck. It was pain that hadn't been addressed. So yes, patience is huge, and we want to make sure that we're not just waiting in avoidance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sure people have noticed throughout this episode, but another reason I love listening to your courses and your meditations is your sense of humor and throwing some jokes in there.
Yeah.
What role do you think kind of that play, that silliness brings to, for instance, like manifesting something that you want to bring into your life?
Right. So anything we take too seriously, we freeze it. The seriousness is a freezing agent. It's literally you. If you try to control something, perfect it, and take it too seriously, you're energetically freezing it in its place. You're not giving it any room. And usually, excessive seriousness, the kind of seriousness I'm talking about, not the kind of seriousness like I'm a surgeon and I have to do open heart surgery and I have to focus.
Right.
That we want to keep. I don't want my surgeon to be like, ha, this is so funny. You have a heart. Maybe you'll survive. No, I don't mean that kind. I mean I'm trying to control the shit out of life seriousness, and my pain is serious, and who I think I am is serious, and my ego is serious, that kind. And when we freeze things that way, nothing changes. And then we're going, see, nothing changes. This is effed up. We like revalidate that life is punishing us or something like that. So too much seriousness in the way I'm talking about it is usually a reflection of some pain. So seriousness is the icing on the cake. So if you're like, why am I so serious? You want to step back and ask yourself what's underneath it. And usually there's some kind of pain. And so the reason I use so much laughter in my meditations is to almost like disarm everybody and realize they don't have to take themselves or their pain too seriously. And when you loosen up a little bit, the energy can move. And when the energy moves, that's when you actually heal. So there's you don't want to go overboard of like laughing at your own pain where now you're like disassociated. Like, wow, I was abused as a kid. Ha ha. Like, no,
Yeah.
like that's not what I mean. Please don't take it that way. But there is a certain like, we have no idea. First of all, we're on a rock spinning in the middle of space. If I ask you, why were you born? You don't know. We have no memory of the first 3 years of our lives, and someone slaps a name on us and says, you're a boy, you're a girl, you're whoever. And then we're like, all right, I'm just supposed to figure this shit out. And then you get older, like, oh, I have to make money and a partner. Oh my God, you're scrambling. And then I have to get good at some skill so the world has use for me. And so I have a home and food. And then all of a sudden you're like, I figured it out. And now people start dying. And you're like, oh, what the fuck is this? I just figured it out. Now people I love are dying. And it's this like, what the hell is this experience? And if you can't step back and see that the universe, the fabric of the universe has a layer of like this cosmic, just laugh at the paradox of it all, that you're trying to hold on to something that's impossible to hold on to. I mean, there's a deep existential part of that where you're just like, this is wild. This is a wild freaking ride that we're on. It just is. I don't know if life is a mystery that's solvable. It might be infinite pages to the book. Just like no matter what you solve, something else opens. It might just be the ride that we're on. And you got to laugh at that. It's like, what? I'm born into some infinite ride I can't quite ever fully figure out. I'm just trying to love everyone and have them love me. Holy Lord.
Yeah. And in some ways that simplifies it too, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can laughing, I think, and just having fun with whatever your mindfulness routine is, whether people do choose to start meditating or do something else that brings them that stillness, like just allowing yourself to be like, well, let's just see what works today, and
Yeah.
experimenting always and exploring always. I think that's part of the fun of being alive, right? That you can just take this time to explore and experiment.
And let me add to that, maybe the outside world will never be totally like figure outable.
Well,
Maybe it's,
yeah.
but there might be a level of self discovery and self mastery and enlightenment that is. So I don't want to say all is lost. Perhaps what happens is like the light in you turns on, and then you could always see 10 feet in front of you. And it's like driving a car. It's like you only need those 10, 20 feet and you could drive any distance. So it might be more like that. It's not that you can see everything in every direction. I don't think the Buddha, for example, knew everything. Is he probably could just light what was around him to, and some people more, some people less, and some people in certain directions and other people in other directions. So I like to, it's like we're turning the light on in ourselves. So you can know yourself to a certain degree that can bring a level of inner peace where you're
Yeah.
not always resisting and struggling and suffering. I do think that is accomplishable. So not all is lost. And
Yeah.
then when it comes to stillness and silence, we live in a very big universe that's probably infinite and that could feel very overwhelming if you think about it. It's like anxiety inducing. But if you really meditate and tap into a certain level of stillness in yourself, and I can't bring you there, you have to, this is the kind of thing you have to go by yourself through the portal alone. Nobody can do this one with you. And when you get there, you realize, oh, I am connected to every single thing that exists. I am one, you could say, with all of life. There's an understanding that transcends what your mind can fully comprehend, that you can only experience. Trying to think about it and understanding it is like trying to wipe something off your face in the mirror. Like you're just like, I can't. That's what the mind tries to do at this level. It's just like love. It's like something that's experienced. It cannot be just analytical. You can't touch it that way. And so when you meditate enough and you get through the noise and the pain and all the limitations and the I'm not good enough and why do I keep eating chocolates? When you get through all of that and you find the stillness, there's it's almost like the world was so small. It's like, oh my God, all my fears and my little ego things is so small. And then it opens up and it's like, whoa, there's this whole other dimension here. And then it's like a well, when someone has a well on their land and it has like so much water, you can just kind of tap into it any time when you're low on energy or you're not feeling good or you need wisdom. And then like that source of energy is like always there. So most people are cut off from it, unfortunately, because they live in their heads. When
Hmm.
we meditate, we reconnect to it.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to summarize it.
Thanks. I interviewed a guy named Irvin Laszlo once. I think he's nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a couple of times, and amazing philosopher, 94, 5 years old by now, wrote over 100 books. And the last book he wrote was called like the Reconnecting to the Source. And I thought that was after 100 books, the one he decided to write was Reconnecting to the Source. And what he did was he asked all these cool spiritual teachers and people like Jane Goodall to write a chapter about their own personal spiritual awakening and how they connected to that source. Because after 100 books, he thought that's what was important. I thought that was really cool. So we all have that connection, and when we find it, the quality, the energetic quality of our life just becomes different, and everything stops being a problem all the time. She said this about me. There's not enough money. I'm not good enough. It's like this sportscaster in the back of your head who's like play by playing how shitty you are. Right? We have to. If we don't wake up out of that, no matter what happens to us, we're going to be suffering. And so, if meditation does anything, it helps us wake up out of that, connect to something deeper, and live a more, you might not always be happy. If you're always happy, then you're a psychopath, right? Like you're just
Agreed.
like,
Agreed.
yeah, you're off in some
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can be at inner peace. You can have inner
Yeah.
peace. Yeah.
And I'm gonna have to check out that book because I recently did an
Yeah.
Akashic readings session.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know if you've done one of those or anything,
Sure.
but one thing that my soul council kind of passed to me was that the biggest lie that I still am kind of believing is that me and the universe or source or God or whatever you want to say are separate. And they're like, that is
Mm-hmm.
the biggest lie. If you can start to let go of that and kind of debunk that and like you said, connect to that source, connect to that well, um, that's kind of the key.
Yeah, that is the great spiritual lie that
Yeah.
we all live with, we all live in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's very wise to be aware of that and to work. And again, that might be something layer by layer, energy by energy, that you have to work out of yourself and
Yeah.
reconnect over and over and over again. I think that's probably why the Buddha sat under a tree in nature, and that was probably something that helped him ground and connect to that source. But it's different for each of us. Yeah, I used to run a school for intuitive development in Hawaii, so we spent 7 years doing that kind of work. So yeah, I'm super familiar with it, and it's fun for those of you spiritual woo-woo people who are into that kind of
It
thing.
was fun.
So the Akashic records, so you can think of them as like the cloud, the library in the sky
Hmm.
of wisdom and past experience. And in India, that's a very common kind of concept to connect with your records in that way. It's almost like not all of my wisdom or my experience can fit into this one little human body, and sometimes a little bit comes in at a time, like, I got that realization. And so I've seen this with a lot of spiritual people. It's like they're very out of their bodies, they're just like floating around, life is bliss. And that was me for a while, but it's because they're so not in their bodies and they're not being human, and so they're avoiding all their pain. And then when we come more in, it's like we don't just incarnate when we're born. It's like we incarnate every morning and we incarnate every moment. And so, like, we're constantly incarnating more and more. Sometimes there's pain with that experience, but we also are bringing in wisdom
Hmm.
and a good, well-lived human life, a real incarnation. When you get fully into your toes and your fingertips, I think exercise is really, really helpful for that. And then when you do all the woo-woo spiritual stuff, it's okay because you're like grounded. I
Yeah.
think what turns off a lot of people about spirituality and like energy stuff is people are very like wide-eyed and just like, oh my God, tripping out about something, and they just seem ungrounded and it feels uncomfortable, and that happens a lot. And so we want to embrace our humanity, and then we can pop in and out, astral travel or do whatever we want to do,
Yeah.
come back and be present and kind of have it all in a safe way. There were some folks in Hawaii that they would always do these dolphin swims and then like channel aliens, but they were all they
Nice.
were just,
Nice.
yeah, I mean, fun, but they were just tripping balls. They were just like so ungrounded. It
Yeah.
didn't feel safe. And so, whenever we get into that stuff, we want to do it in a really safe, healthy way. And I try to teach my students that I don't want to avoid it. I want you to do it in a safe, healthy way.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great note to end on, too. Dolphins and aliens. I like it. But before I let you go, because I think we could talk meditation and mindset forever with your expertise, but where is the best way for people to find you, to connect with you, to join meditation school?
Yeah, just wait for the UFO to come right over your house and I'll
And
pick
it,
you up.
yep,
Yeah.
perfect.
Hey, it's me. Um, well, you're weirdo. How do you have my address? No, uh, I do like Star Trek a lot, so I'm super into space. Um, yeah, you could. So I would say simply two places you can find me on Insight Timer, the app, which is really easy. Just type in David, I'll pop up, and then Meditation School. .us is my meditation platform. We're coming out with an app in a couple of weeks, so you'll be able to access it that way. And me and or my other teacher, Desi, who teaches hypnotherapy, she's amazing, lovely British accent. When she puts you down, we one of us teaches every week live, so it's nice to be part of a group and that energy. And then if you don't make it there live, obviously, like, it's all there for you later. But my approach is different, I think, than a lot of the meditation you'll find out there, which is like very short form, like, hey, here's your 2 minute break, your 5 minute thing. Like, I have a little bit of that too, but I'm much more into, let's go deep together for a longer period of time, address a real issue. Like, I think we've got enough of the watch your breath, relax. Like, there's enough of that out there. I don't need to add to that. Like, really get deeper into, all right, I have a core issue I'm struggling with. Let's look at it directly. Let's learn some tools to heal it and shift the energy, and really grow from the inside out in a deep way. So my meditations, maybe they're a little bit longer, but because they're guided, they don't feel I don't think they feel intimidating, where someone's like, I can't meditate for 15 or 25 minutes. What? I need 4 minutes. And I always say, Like nothing good in life happens in 4 or 5 minutes, right? Like if you do 3 push-ups, you're never going to build any muscle, right? Or like 2 squats, unless
Fair.
you're doing like the heaviest weight, and then you're just going to get hurt. So it's like it takes a certain amount of reps, a certain amount of time and energy for your mind to quiet down, and then for like the next layer to come up. And a lot of meditations don't get you there because they're just like, watch your breath for 5 minutes and now we're done. And that's, yeah. I mean, I've said this before, but it's like you don't want all your sex lasting that little amount of time. Like it, right? Like intimacy doesn't work that way long term. Neither does meditation, because it takes longer to get intimate with yourself. You don't know yourself well that yet. It takes time to deepen and to go inwards and just start to shift the energy. So give yourself that time. And if you
Yes.
say, I don't have the time, it's not that you don't have, it's not the time, it's the energy. When you say I don't have time, 90% or 98% of the time, it's energy. You're in resistance to something. I've never seen somebody who actually doesn't have the time. That's not a real thing. You're like, no, I have 5 kids. I don't have the time, David. All right. Do you sleep? So when you lay in bed to close your eyes, you fall asleep meditating. There's always a way.
Oh, seriously, your sleep meditations are so good. Like,
Thanks.
out. I don't think I've ever finished one.
I need to make some more. So that one's called the Grounded Sleep
Yes,
podcast.
grounded sleep. That's another good one.
Try to bore you to sleep with my
Yeah.
terrible stories. And then I got a number 2 pencil. And then I filled out the SATs.
It works. It works. Yeah, well, thank you so much. So that's a ton of places that everyone listening, go find David's meditations. They just might change your life. And thank you so much for being here. I'll have to come up to Boulder soon.
Oh yeah, we live so close.
Yeah.
I'll do a retreat sometime up here.
Yes.
Maybe we'll get all the folks together in Colorado. That'd be super fun. We'll eat granola. We'll wear Patagonia. We'll go hiking
Wear
with
our
our
chacos.
golden
Yeah.
retrievers. Yeah.
Perfect. Our rescue Goldens.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I would.
Yeah, adopt.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Thank you for being here, David.
Thank you.
Do you feel energized and refreshed now? I hope this episode gave you a little boost to get out there and start manifesting your fittest, healthiest life. If you loved it, please help me out by writing a review and sharing this episode to your story. And seriously, just thank you so much for being here. For daily updates of what I've got going on and to connect further, be sure to follow me on Instagram and head over to ccowellness.com to learn more about my one-on-one coaching and find additional resources there, including my Goddess's Guide to Macros ebook, plus a few freebies. And remember, you are strong, you are capable of achieving anything you desire, and you are worthy of all your wildest dreams.